Okay, thank you. Um, I hate standing at this podium lately. Unfortunately, we're here, the good prosecutor, Karen McDonald, and I, tag teaming yet again on another terrible, terrible case. So I'll give you a little bit of the background, and then our prosecutor will speak to the charges that have already been issued. So the baseline is this: on August 7th, we received information concerning potential criminal activities of a physician, Dr. Omer Ajaz. Omer Ajaz, I believe is the pronunciation. 37-year-old Rochester Hills resident who's married and is the father of two young boys. The allegations were that he was engaged in activity, including but not limited to placing hidden cameras in changing rooms, video recording young children as young as 2 years of age, and all the way up to grown adults in different settings. The current criminal charges, which the prosecutor will speak to, are primarily from activities conducted in Rochester and Rochester Hills when he was off duty, where it appears to utilize cameras that were deployed separate from himself and then also on his person. They were used in changing rooms, bathrooms, hospital rooms, as well as inside closets, bathrooms, and bedrooms of residents that he had access to. We believe the criminal activity has been going back at least 6 years, but this is, and I can't stress this enough, so much the tip of the iceberg. He was arrested on August 8th by our detectives as they were serving a search warrant, and again, formally charged by the prosecutor, which she'll speak to those charges. He's currently in our jail at $2 million cash bond, no 10%. So the background on this individual is he's an Indian citizen, has been working in the U.S. on a visa, came to the United States about 2011 for his internship in Michigan. He moved to Dawson, Alabama around 2018 and returned to Oakland County to continue his practice here. So this may stretch not just in Michigan, but to other states and potentially even other countries. He has worked at Ascension Genesis Hospital in Grand Blanc and Henry Ford Macomb Hospital in Clinton Township, but we're still trying to determine where else he may have worked. He was apparently an individual, a contracted physician that went two different locations for a company rather than having his own specific practice. So we still don't know the scope of how many facilities or venues he may have visited in that regard. It's obviously, as I said, very active investigation. It's in its infancy. We've already done a great number of search warrants. We've confiscated at this point 6 computers, 4 cellular phones, 15 external storage devices, and just one of the hard drives has 13,000 videos. So each one of them will have to be gone through to determine if there's criminality or potential criminality in those videos, and then the prosecutor ultimately will determine if there is the charges from those. This could take as long as 6 months just to get through what we already have. So our computer crimes unit is deeply engaged in this and has put tons of hours into this already. And the other potential is there also might be cloud storage. So we're trying to run that down, which obviously would add the potential for more. Due to the lengthy time that he's been involved in this activity and the large amounts of storage that we have in our possession, we believe there's obviously a lot more to be uncovered. So we're seeking to identify more victims, and we set up a special email for anybody that believes that they are a victim of this activity to email and communicate directly with our investigators. We'll be displaying that, but I will read it to you. It is OCSO, like our initials, SIU, which is our Special Investigation Unit, OCSO SIU at oakgov.com. We'll put that up on the screen. If you believe you've been a victim or have information about this individual or this person's activities, please send us anything that you have or any questions or concerns you have. We believe he did his residency at Sinai Grace, and as I said, then went to Alabama, and has been involved in a lot of different scenarios. So, you know, as we look at this, and I've been involved in sexual predator criminal investigations for a long time. You know, I've been in law enforcement 37 years, and in my early part of my career, I did a number of investigations of sexual predators. And then in a moment in between that career, I was a senator, and I wrote the Sex Offender Registry Act. And so I went deep down the rabbit hole of profiling sexual offenders to determine how they operated and how we could best protect the public from them. This individual potentially is one of the worst I've ever seen, because there's no particular category. It's not just children, it's not just women, it's not just men. It goes from a 2-year-old to a grown woman. And so the victimization is so broad and the perversion so great that we're just beginning to wrap our arms around it. And disturbing on so many levels that it's hard to look at the videos of that activity where a woman is basically unconscious in a hospital bed and he's violating her, to a 2-year-old thinking they're out for a great swim day and they're being captured naked. There's nobody that's out of bounds for this sick activity. So I'm excited that our prosecutors already got him locked up, why we continue the investigation. If there's medical facilities that I have not talked about that have had him licensed or practicing in their facility, they need to let us know, because we're working to get our arms around how big this is. But when you think about the incredible perversion and destructive activity of Nasser, he had a much smaller group of victims in terms of potential. There's no limit to his perversion of this individual. And so we're going to need the public's help and victims' help, because a lot of these we may not even be able to identify because we have so many victims, so many videos of people. We have no idea who they are and sometimes yet what the venue is. So with that, I'll kick it over. I'll put up the, that is our individual. I'll let you capture that, and then I'll put up the email address and I'll kick it over to our prosecutor.
How old is he?
37.
Thank you.
And that's the email address on the bottom.
Thank you so much, Sheriff. I'm going to talk about the charges that our office has already issued. But first I want to say, much like Sheriff Bouchard, the victims are our primary focus. I too started my career as a prosecutor, prosecuting child sexual assault cases, and I feel like we find ourselves saying a lot, this is the worst we've seen, and yet we see worse. But this particularly hit home to me as just being a mom. These allegations stemmed from a mom bringing her young children to a swim school and taking them into a changing room and getting them changed. And the allegations are that the defendant was filming them from a nearby changing area stall. And it's a complete violation, and it's terrifying as a mother. And we're going to do everything we can to hold him accountable. And we're working in partnership with that. As the sheriff just said, this stems from events that occurred, the events of our current criminal case, August 13th. the defendant's wife produced materials that were concerning. The Oakland County Sheriff's Office immediately executed a search warrant and confiscated more devices, and has sifted through really jarring, alarming images, and they're still doing that. He is charged with 1 count of child sexually abusive activity, 4 counts of capturing an image of an unclothed person, 5 counts of using a computer to commit a crime, and he's being held on a $2 million bond, no 10%. We feel confident that he will remain there. Of course, these are all allegations, and the defendant's presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. As the sheriff said, it's extremely disturbing. These videos were taken, these images, some of them in a swim school in Rochester, where moms and kids were just there for their swimming lessons and changing in a changing area. And those are just the charges we've brought so far that relate to the victims that we can identify. As the sheriff said, we fully expect and actually know that there are thousands and thousands of images and videos that we will have to work, law enforcement in partnership with others, to identify who those victims are. And those are all being investigated. I also want to say that this is, there are so many victims that we know about and a lot we don't know about. But this individual preyed not just on parents and community members and trust, but also in our well-respected institutions and hospitals, who I do want to point out have been very cooperative and are working to see those victims identified and want very much to work with law enforcement to hold him accountable. I can't stress enough the amount of hours and hours and hours of work it takes for the computer crimes section of the sheriff's office. And they have been doing that almost around the clock for over a week. These are difficult images to view, and it will take some time. We wanted to be cautious and careful about what we release to the public, because we don't and can't identify all the victims at this point. We now have ability to access information and digitally analyze so much evidence, and because of that are bringing these kinds of horrific acts to light. But it takes a partnership with our law enforcement, and we rely on the computer crimes section a lot, and we are continuing to work together to make sure we can identify all the victims in this case. Thank you.
Questions?
Are the allegations all that it was just, not just, but that it was on camera, he was recording people, videoing people? Or is there any that he was actually sexually abusing?
Oh, yeah, he definitely sexually abused some of the folks, even on camera.
Since he's an Indian citizen, is this investigation going to go across international borders as well? Are you in touch with Indian police?
Well, that, as I said at the outset, I think that's a good possibility. It will end up in multiple states, potentially multiple countries. So as our computer crimes unit, who unfortunately has the task of seeing this disgusting stuff nonstop, if we're able to either use geotags or other kinds of things that will help us determine where things happen, you know, it will just take it where it is, and then obviously engage with our international partners as well.
So far, how many victims do we have?
I can't even put a guess on it because there's so many images.
Ones you've identified?
We haven't identified many of the victims, but we have multiple people that are captured on film in different states of complete undress, or where they are appears to be under some kind of anesthesia, and they're being violated. I can't even put a guess on it at this point.
Would you be able to share how did this crime come to light?
We were given information by his wife.
Are the 5 victims who are in the charged cases, they're in court records as Jane Doe's and John Doe? Does that mean they're not identified yet, or are you just protecting their identity?
We're protecting their identity. The current charges that we've issued from the events that we've identified have occurred in Oakland County thus far involve 4 separate victims, and we absolutely have identified them, but are trying to protect their privacy.
Can you tell us what was the swim club in Rochester Hills, the name of it?
Yeah, and again, as the prosecutor said, the hospitals and the swim location are victims in this as well. There is no information at all that they had any idea any of this behavior was going on, but it was the goldfish facility in Rochester.
And they've all been very cooperative.
Super cooperative.
Can I just clarify, the victims that have been identified, the 4 victims in the currently charged case, where were those victims at? Obviously, we know Goldfish facility in Rochester. Was there another hospital as well, or were the victims all from that swim school?
The currently charged cases are stemmed from the swim school. And it is a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, and 2 adult females.
Were these devices placed in areas that he had specific access to, or could they have been, more public places no one would expect him to be able to plant a device like that?
Yeah, it looks like he's potentially using a variety of camera options, including something that may have been accessible, maybe even controlled by a device, and some things may have been just his cell phone. I mean, that's still a work in progress, but it looks like, again, there's sometimes opportunistic moments when he does it, and other times where it looks like he has intentionally planned the moment.
And just for clarification, I know you guys talked about this, but this time with the kids, this most recent time, I think Karen, you were talking about this stemming from the woman changing her children. Was he physically holding something? Is that how he got caught?
No, he was not caught there. They were unaware. This was discovered on the hard drives that we were investigating. So the camera looks like it's looking underneath into their changing room. And whether, what that actual device looked like, I'm sure we'll get into some more of the evidence as this case proceeds, but he obviously had been examining and researching cameras to do a variety of surreptitious activity.
So he was never physically with the camera when he was with these recordings?
Oh, no, he was with cameras, absolutely. On some of the videos, he actually shows himself.
I understand there's a lot of evidence to go through. So far, how far do you see this sort of activity dating back to?
Well, I detailed what we've seen so far, so I guess, that's the current range. If they find out there's cloud storage, we don't know what may or may not be there. We don't know the depth of, we don't know what we don't know. We just know it's massive, and they've got thousands of hours ahead of them to run through and determine if something looks to be criminal, and then that gets handed to the prosecutor, and then they keep going.
And where was he arrested?
At his home in Rochester Hills.
One last question for me, at least. The court document shows that his age is 40. So is there a discrepancy there?
I was early on told he was 37. Detective, anybody?
So surely he's 40?
We'll confirm that with you. Or when this started percolating, I was told he was 37. Once we kind of had him in our sights, we focused more on what he did, not necessarily his date of birth, but we'll get that to you.
And in the charging documents, I just want to clarify on the number of victims. It lists 4 Jane Does and 1 John Doe. So are there 5 or 4 victims in that case?
There are 4 victims.
Sorry, one other question on the Goldfish facility incident. So the offense date on the online court record shows August 21st, 2023. So this was an event that happened last summer that was seen on the hard drives. That's how you connected that case. Is that correct?
Correct.
It was from last year, okay.
Correct.
What would you guys say to victims who might see this, who are a little nervous to come forward, even still with his face out there and everything?
That's why we gave an email so that they could do it, in a way that's hopefully not fearful for them, that they don't have to, physically come in. They can send in information, and then we can begin to make sure that they understand we're on their team. If they're a victim, we're gonna do everything we can to protect them, but also to hold the perpetrator accountable for what was done to them.
And for the thousands of videos that you were talking about found on the hard drives, is that believed to be all like pornographic images?
We have to go through it. Yeah, I mean, some of these last an extended period of time and you may watch the whole thing and there may be nothing that appears to be criminal, and other of these videos, it pops up immediately like, oh my gosh, where is he now?
I do want to point out that the charge of child sexual activity, abusive activity, is related to a underage individual who is not named. We don't know the identity, but it's of pornographic nature, and just the possession of that. That's what that charge relates to.
And that's not related to the swim school.
That's correct.
So he's not charged with creating child porn at this point then?
He is charged with one count of child sexually abusive activity. So that means it's on his device.
Possession of a child,
Well, the charging language is did attempt, prepare, or conspire to arrange for, produce, make, copy, reproduce, or finance any child sexually abusive material. So that might be why you were thinking there were 5. One is unidentified.
So 4 identified, then the 1 unidentified.
Yes.
Do we have a correct pronunciation of his name?
That's the best information I was told.
Ajaz.
Sorry? Ajaz.
Ajaz.
Omer Ajaz. There we have it.
Can you just read those charges, that list of charges again? I wasn't quick enough to jot them down.
Sure. I have it written down here. One count of child sexually abusive activity, 1 count of using a computer to commit a crime, 4 counts of using a computer to commit a crime, and then 4 counts of capturing and distributing image of unclothed person.
How many charges?
10 total.
For the video that you mentioned of the woman unconscious in her hospital bed, was he there as a doctor or somebody visiting, or are you not sure at this point?
There's not just one. There's not just one.
Yeah, she was mentioned there's more than one,
Oh, more than
unfortunately. Woman that appears to be in that situation, whether that was an individual he had been charged with any kind of medical care of, or he just accessed that room on his own, or if he went there on his own time because he had credentials. All of that's part of the investigation.
And not the subject of any charges at this point.
I also noticed there's a distribution charge as well. Was there an aspect where he was distributing those images somewhere?
There's 5 counts of using a computer to commit a crime, 4 counts of capturing, distributing the image of an unclothed person. Those relate to the Goldfish Swim School. 2 of the victims were not minors.
And to put a kind of an exclamation point on your question, at this point, our computer crimes unit hasn't determined he had sent these or shared these elsewhere, but these were his. But that's still going to be part if they find in the computer or the devices that he had been communicating or sharing. If you remember a very terrible case we had many, many years ago, we started with a few victims at a home in Oakland County and found out it was a national network of that they would do the victimization and then share it. And we don't have anything on that at this point, but that doesn't mean it's not there.
And you compared this case to the Nasser case. From what you've seen so far, does this have the potential to be bigger than that because of his victimization pool?
Yeah, I mean, that's what concerns me is that as terrible as that case was, it was based on actual patients in front of him, typically in a certain kind of target victimization. This has no target. It's completely random. It can be a stranger. It can be a person in a medical setting. It can be someone in his home. It can be anyone.
just to clarify, sorry, it sounds like maybe the date I'm looking at on here concerning the swim school might not be accurate. What is the date of the offense on the swim school incident?
That was in August of '23.
Is it all from one event or is it from multiple separate incidents?
It stems, it's not just from one one day. So there's a range.
Does he have a medical speciality?
He's an internist.
So what hospital, I mean, you said Henry Ford McComb, is that who he's been most recently?
And no, I also said another one. Those are the two that we're distinctly aware of. Henry Ford McComb and Ascension Genesis. But, there's a potential for him to have been elsewhere, and that's still, as I said, if any other medical facilities had him credentialed or any other victim is aware of him being in another facility, we would like that information.
And there's nothing public on Lara about a history of issues with his license. Are you aware of anything?
We have no criminal history on him or any other complaints prior to us getting tapped into this early this month.
Is there anything people can do to make sure that this doesn't happen to them? I mean, if they're going into, a public facility like a swim school or even a hospital, what can you do to prevent this?
Yeah, that's probably one of the most disturbing parts is it's so unsettling because it's so random and it's so prolific in different venues. So, you don't think about certain things and we in law enforcement think about the worst thing all the time. We're always looking. But, I hate to tell people, but when they go into a changing room, you're going to have to be aware. We know that. We've seen that in people have put cameras in hotel rooms and left them, and they've done a variety of things. It's one of those things where you just never know. You should be situationally aware is what we tell people. Certainly, if the changing room, like in some situations are, like if you go to a department store, sometimes the changing room doors are almost like bathroom stalls. They don't go to the floor. Lots of times we'll see individuals using that at the top or the bottom, because it's not a wall all the way to the ceiling. There's a variety of ways that this is accomplished. Just try to be situationally aware. But we hate to make people paranoid, but unfortunately we've got some very sick people in this world. So that's one of the things we were actually chatting about in the medical setting. Obviously, if you can, have somebody with you as your loved one when you're undergoing any medical procedures and when you're, coming out of those procedures, if at all possible, to have somebody with you. Because, again, the hospitals have been super cooperative and they're super unaware of all this. But because of his access and credentials, he could move pretty fluidly into some of these different situations.
Are you working with other law enforcement agencies?
We've already advised the different police agencies in the communities we're aware of what we're working on. There's going to be a meeting in the near future with detectives from those agencies. And as this, spins out, if it gets a lot bigger, we may have to create a task force at some point, potentially, because it may be, as I said, something that grows exponentially depending on what they find and see.
Can you say what those agencies are that you're working with right now?
Well, the two venues that you have, obviously, is you got Genesee and Macomb. So the Clinton Township and Grand Blanc Township are two of the agencies where those were the venues of stuff we've at least identified. We've already communicated with Rochester City Police, but that's within Oakland County, but they're also looped in on this as well.
So this isn't just a case of him setting up cameras, getting his videos, you've actually got a video of him assaulting people. Is that what I'm getting?
Yes. It goes beyond just capturing video. There's physical, assaultive, criminal conduct.
How did he get access to the swimming pool? Did he use his kids to be able to get in, or?
That's still under investigation. Yes, they have kids. Yes, they've been there on those days in question. We don't know whether, his kids were there. That's still part of a work in progress. I wouldn't put it past them, given what we've seen, to utilize, children to put himself in a position to victimize other people. Again, going back to that one case, that individual had young kids, I think about 6 years old, and invited other kids over for play days and then victimized those kids. So, you know, when you get somebody this with a very sick predatory predilection, they utilize their access to get other victims.
That's not him you were just talking about, though, right? That
No,
was-
I said that earlier case. So that, you know, to the question of how did he access certain areas where there were kids, we're not sure at this point whether he went in there with his kids to get into that location to be able to do that, or whether he was able to get in alone.
But you did say in the press release that, or bulletin, that this happened in the swim club, hospital, and then also you said in his home, correct?
Yes.
So can you elaborate on that?
Use of the cameras, use of other things, we're just, again, scratching the surface, but based on that evidence that they've seen, they've been able to identify some of this occurred in private homes, including his.
What happened in his own home, if you're able to talk about that?
Capturing images of people when they were not aware,
Like
Yeah.
wife and,
beyond that.
Just to be clear, these are explicit images of people, it's not just like capturing images of folks, it's like he's capturing.
Right, not just taking a picture of someone having a cup of coffee, taking pictures while they're in the bathroom naked, as an example.
and how many kids did you say this guy had?
Sorry?
How many kids did you say he had?
2.
2. Are we able to talk about the gender
About what?
of the 2 kids?
2 young boys.
If you could get the clarification on its age, that would be helpful to all of
Yep,
us.
we'll get that, if somebody can check his booking, we'll get that right now.
40.
He's 40.
Thank you very much. Thank you.